Welcome to a debate between the Maryland Congressional District 1 candidates. Cecil TV would like to acknowledge the assistance of Cecil College and their Visual Communications Program staff in producing this program. We'd also like to thank Professor Todd Eberly of St. Mary's College of Maryland for being our moderator, and special thanks to Premier Auto and Tire for sponsoring this program.
Is your car running like it's 4th and long and you need a Hail Mary?
It's the best service in town all season long.
We have professional technicians standing by to help with everything from preventive care to major engine repairs. Looking for a specific brand of tire? Talk to our experts about our wide variety of tires and we'll have you rolling in no time. Come see the guys at Premier Auto and Tire at one of our locations.
Welcome, Maryland viewers. My name is Todd Eberly. I'm an associate professor of political science and the interim director of the Center for the Study of Democracy at St. Mary's College of Maryland. I'll be your moderator for this debate. At this time, I'd like to introduce the candidates for Maryland's 1st Congressional District: Republican Representative Andy Harris, Democrat Jesse Colvin, and Libertarian Jenica Martin. Thank you all for being here. The candidates have drawn numbers to determine the order in which they will deliver their opening statements, their rebuttals and responses, as well as their closing statements. Each candidate will be provided 60 seconds to provide an opening statement at the beginning, and another 60 seconds to provide a closing statement at the end. The first 3 questions will be directed to all of the candidates, and each will be allowed 90 seconds to respond. After all candidates have responded, the candidates will have an opportunity for 60 seconds of rebuttal. The last 3 questions will be directed at specific candidates. For these questions, the candidate receiving the question will have 90 seconds for response, and the other candidates will have 60 seconds for rebuttal. Cecil TV's timekeeper will flash a brightly colored card when a candidate has 15 seconds left for their answer, and once the candidate's time is up, the timekeeper will ring a bell. And with that behind us, let's get started. The order of the opening statements, as determined by random drawing, will begin with Mr. Colvin.
Thank you to Cecil TV, and thank you to my wife, Jordan. After a year of campaigning, showing up, listening to the folks in our district, I know 2 things. First, this election is a referendum on Andy Harris. Full stop. When was the last time you saw Dr. Harris? Did he look excited to be there with you? Congress is broken because we have petty partisanship, special interests, and career politicians. Second, there is a movement for change in our district. I have met with small business owners, veterans, farmers, watermen, nurses, opioid addiction specialists, educators. I'm an Army Ranger. I served 4 combat tours in Afghanistan. On my first, my boss said, "Jesse, I fired the last 4 guys. I don't care if you have enough energy, time, resources, you will get the job done or I'll fire you." You bet I got that job done. That attitude is locking in Congress and certainly in Dr. Harris. We need a new generation of leadership who's going to get results and put country over party. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martin.
I've spent my adult life working for the betterment of others. And what I have seen is that our government is failing to ensure that the rights of the individual are protected. I'm looking to ensure that the rights of the individual are protected. I'm looking to ensure that legislation no longer hinders our abilities to live based on the values and the belief systems that we believe in. As your candidate for Congress, I will fight to ensure that legislation no longer hinders your abilities to live the way that you want to live. Gun control, healthcare, opioid addiction, the environment, these are pieces of legislation and policy measures that really need to be reevaluated. And our current congressional members are not doing that because they're answering to their special interest groups. I'm looking to put a stop to that.
Thank you. Mr. Harris.
Todd, thank you. You know, I'm not a newcomer to this district. I've lived here for over 30 years, served you in Congress, and I've served 16 years in the U.S. Naval Reserve, actually commanding the Johns Hopkins Naval Reserve Medical Unit, which served during Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Look, I know it's rare for someone to run for office and actually deliver on their promises, but when I ran for office, I promised more jobs, lower taxes. And that's what we delivered. Unemployment is its lowest rate, 7.2 million jobs available across the country, and we passed the largest tax cut in American history, putting $2,500 back into the pockets of the average family in the 1st District. I promised to be a leader on issues that are important to the 1st District, and that's why I'm proud that I was named Friend of the Farmer by the American Farm Bureau Federation and Guardian of Small Business by the National Federation of Independent Businesses. These groups, representing such important parts of the 1st District's economy, know exactly what I've delivered to the district in Congress.
Thank you. The first question will go to Mr. Harris. It involves the opioid epidemic. The problems associated with the opioid epidemic in this district and across the state are well known. Do you support access to medication-assisted treatment as an important component of fighting opioid addiction? And if so, how will you ensure that people have access to those services, such as support for continuing to fund them through the Medicaid expansion or the Affordable Care Act programs?
Sure. Look, opioid addiction and addiction in general is a scourge in our district. It affects every community. It's a scourge in the entire country. It affects every community in the district, every county in the district. That's why I've visited all these counties, spoken to their sheriffs, spoken to their drug addiction treatment specialists, and gotten a handle on exactly what it is that we need to do. Now, this is not going to be easy. As a physician, I'll tell you right now, drug addiction is never cured. People go into remission, they're not cured. They need lifelong treatment and attention. It starts early, it starts when they're children. We have to make sure that we have families and homes that support wholesome youth. Then we have to make sure that our schools are a safe haven for people where drugs are not available. We have to have enforcement against the importation, especially now, of the so dangerous fentanyl drugs. And finally, we have to have treatment programs and post-treatment programs that our citizens can avail themselves of. Every community is going to have a different solution. A top-down Washington solution is not going to work everywhere. In some communities, public health departments are very strong, and that's where the dollar should go. In others, it's not. It's volunteer organizations. That's where the dollar should go. So what we did in Congress, we passed two things. In 2016, we passed the CARA Act, the Comprehensive Addiction Reform Act, the greatest addiction reform in 40 years. And last year, I was proud to vote for the Support Act, which again was a comprehensive bill dealing with all these aspects of opioid use.
Thank you. Mr. Colvin.
We're in Cecil County. There are 5,000 to 10,000 kids right now in Cecil County growing up in homes where opioids are being used regularly. I don't know how I could stand here with integrity if I was in the back pocket of Big Pharma on this issue, to take courage to this issue. Dr. Harris is taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from Big Pharma. I don't know how I could stand up here with integrity on this issue. My message is very simple. If you care about this issue, if it's impacted your life personally, you know someone it's impacted, find every member of Congress, Democrat, Independent, Republican, if they are in the big pocket of Big Pharma, vote them out. Thank you.
Ms. Martin.
Thank you. While I definitely feel that Dr. Harris and Mr. Colvin do have some points, their statistics aren't the reality. My mother has been on opioids, prescribed legal opioids, for 25 years due to a car accident of no fault of her own. And I have watched her body and mind deteriorate because of this medication. The problem isn't in the streets. The problem is in our homes. The individuals who suffer from pain management obstacles that are being prescribed these drugs. And half the time, these prescriptions stop and they turn to the streets where they find heroin and fentanyl. And a lot of that is what's increasing the opioid epidemic in Maryland. I believe that, number one, pharmaceutical companies should be held accountable for the distribution and the production of the drugs that they failed to inform patients about 25 years ago, that now they no longer have the experience and the education and the information to weed themselves off of these drugs. Number two, I believe that there should be opioid options, or not even opioid options. There should be medication options outside of opioids like medicinal marijuana, where patients can utilize pain management options without being worried about addictions to something that they can't stop just instantly because of the medical consequences.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, 60 seconds for response.
Sure. You know, it's very interesting. Mr. Colvin says that I take all this money from drug companies, but he's more than happy to take money from Steny Hoyer, who's actually received twice as much. So I'm going to ask you, Jesse, are you going to give Mr. Hoyer's money back? Or are you going to level the same complaints against Mr. Hoyer? Now, I am a leader in Congress on the biodefense pharmaceutical industry issue. Now, these are the companies that actually produce the anthrax vaccine, the biochemical defense weapons that our men and women in uniform depend on. They produce, one of the companies actually produces Narcan, which actually has been the greatest contributor to our decrease in the number of opioid deaths, including right here in Cecil County. So again, you know, again, if Mr. Colvin wants to give back Mr. Hoyer's money, that's fine. But you know, he gets a whole lot more, and it's not from the biodefense companies, it's from the other pharmaceutical companies as well.
Mr. Colvin?
The fatalities from the opioids epidemic in our congressional district are 50% higher than the national average. We are getting hammered. I have met more baby boomers raising small kids because that middle generation, my generation, has just vanished. If you care about this issue, find every member of Congress who's in the back pocket of the pharmaceutical industry. Dr. Harris, you've taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from Big Pharma. My message to you is very simple. I don't care if they're a Democrat, I don't care if they're an independent, I don't care if they're a Republican. Vote them out. Thank you.
Ms. Martin.
Dr. Harris and Mr. Colvin are emphasizing pharmaceutical companies. And I'm going to make this point again. Hold them accountable. It's not the taxpayer's responsibility to pay for the consequences of their products. Hold them accountable. That's all that I have to say about that.
Thank you. The next question will begin with Mr. Colvin. It involves veterans issues. How would you get the federal government to see the importance of enlarging and enhancing the Perry Point VA Hospital in order to better serve its patient population and to attract jobs? Do you favor securing funds for veterans' mental health issues here in Cecil County?
The first step is showing up. We have a fantastic VA facility in Cambridge, Maryland, which services the entire Eastern Shore. I'm a veteran. I served 4 combat tours as an Army Ranger. My wife runs a veteran organization to prevent military veteran suicide. We went down and did a visit in the Cambridge facility. And one thing we learned that in 8 years, Dr. Harris, you've never gone to the VA facility. You have a condo down there, you're a physician, you served in the Navy, sir. One of our big supporters actually happens to be President George W. Bush's Secretary of the VA. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to put our district offices in the VA facilities in our district. I don't want our veterans to have to navigate a bureaucracy that's 1,000 miles away. I want them to have to walk 6 feet. It's really easy to beat up on the VA. What's harder is showing up and building relationships. We have 50 to 75,000 veterans in our district. They need someone who's going to actually work and improve the VA, and the best thing we can do is show up and put our offices in one of them instead of not showing up in 8 years. Thank you.
Ms. Martin.
I hosted a town hall in Kent County, and I walked around by the Kent County Library, and in the park there were 2 homeless Vietnam veterans. Now, even though my heart dropped because of the circumstances that they were in, when I explained to them that I was running for Congress, their response was, "You folks always say what you're going to do, but no one ever does anything." My take on the VHA, privatize it and turn it over to the veterans. Let them control it. Let them choose who they want to receive services from and how those services are rendered. Let them create their own leadership within the VHA so that they never again have to deal with the government bureaucracy that they deal with now, where they feel there's no hope and there's no one out there to assist them.
Thank you. Mr. Harris.
Sure. You're right, Jesse, you're a veteran and I'm a veteran. But I've taken care of patients in a VA hospital. I've actually taken care of patients in a VA hospital. And I visited the Perry Point VA Hospital. And I'm glad you could find your way to Cambridge, Jesse, because a newcomer to the district sometimes can't find their way there. The Perry Point VA is a great facility. And the question was about mental health. They have a very interesting approach to mental health. They incorporate mental health treatment in with primary care, exceedingly important, because mental health can't be partitioned off. So that their approach should actually be a model for the VA nationwide. And again, Jesse, you ought to go visit them and see what it's like. The bottom line is that if we really want to take care of our veterans, what we have to do is we have to allow them the option to receive their health benefits in the VA system or outside the VA system. So Jesse, I'm going to call you to join me and call to allow for every veteran who's eligible to receive health benefits in a VA system to receive that inside or outside the system. Because honestly, I don't have to go visit a VA clinic to hear from veterans. I visit veterans in the VFWs, the American Legions. That's where you hear about the problems. You don't hear about them at the VA hospital. They're not telling the problems. That's why they hid the problems from the American public, had year-long waiting lines, and had people dying in those waiting lines, because the VA hospital won't tell you about that. So we need to allow veterans, they earned that choice.
Mr. Colvin, 60 seconds.
Dr. Harris, you mentioned mental health funding. You voted against $34 million in mental health funding that would have gone to our state, and a lot of it would have gone to the Eastern Shore and to our veterans. If you want to get an idea of how I'm going to approach veterans issues, we're doing an event in a couple weeks. Let me tell you who is on the slate. General Wesley Clark, former NATO commander. Congressman Wayne Gilchrist, Republican who held the seat for 9 terms. Tony Principi, who was George W. Bush's Secretary of the VA. And a Sergeant Major who served in Vietnam, the Desert Storm, who lives in our district. It's going to be about what are the issues facing our veterans in our district, because we have 50 to 75,000 of them, and how can we work on them in Washington. That's how I'm going to approach these issues. We've done 16 official campaign days in Dorchester County, sir. I noticed you said you have not been to the VA facility in Cambridge. You had 8 years to go. Shame on you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martin.
Legislation needs to be implemented that will give more power to the veterans of this country. Our homeless population, veterans with mental issues, is the largest out of the homeless in this country. That is a problem not only when it comes to legislative action, but it's a problem when it comes to what it says about our society as a whole. We need to take care of these men and women that risk their lives to ensure our freedoms. And I think by taking away the centralized bureaucracy can enable that.
Thank you. Mr. Harris.
Well, again, Jesse, I know you moved in the district from Washington, D.C. last year. Welcome. Maybe you ought to go down to Pocomoke and visit the VA facility there, VA clinic there. I did. State-of-the-art telemedicine. Great thing to do. But I'm not going to go to a VA facility to find out what the problems are, because in the VA facilities, they don't tell you the truth, because that's how the Denver facility had its problem with its budget. That's how the Phoenix facility actually was lying about how long patients wait in line. I go to visit veterans in the VFWs, in the American Legions. That's where you hear about the problems. And I didn't hear you join me in allowing veterans a choice. Let every veteran have the choice of where they're going to receive their care. Why lock them into a VA facility that sometimes, like the one in Phoenix, they die waiting for care? That's not what our veterans deserve. They served loyally. They earned the ability to choose where they receive their health care.
Thank you. The next question involving the environment will begin with Ms. Martin. This month, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released its report that warns that holding global warming to even a 1.5 degrees Celsius rise will have significant risks for natural and human systems. Do you take scientists' warnings seriously? And what measures would you support to mitigate the effects of carbon emissions on the environment?
I believe that emissions regulations are a necessity. And the reason why is because I actually spoke to one of our state representatives who handles agricultural concerns. And there's been a huge problem within our district with the fishermen, the watermen, and the emissions from their engines on their boats, the costs to replace those emissions, and how it is affecting, impacting the agricultural system. I do believe that we should place a price on emissions and funnel that money to those that are dealing with the pollutants. I also believe that we should repeal national air and water laws that involve localized pollution. I think we should hand it over to the states and the local governments to choose for their communities, because what's going on in Maryland may not be the same as what's going on in California. And that has been seen with California's enhanced emission standards. I also think we need to phase out subsidy programs that are harmful to taxpayers.
Thank you. Mr. Harris.
Sure. No, the question of climate change is obviously one we have to deal with, Todd. There's no question that humans contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. No question. CO2, methane, we do both. The question is, how large is the effect? What is the effect going to be? And how much it would cost us to mitigate that? Why is that important? Because around the world what we see is that countries that don't have vigorous economies can't actually afford to cut emissions. They just can't. The greatest emitters of carbon dioxide, for instance, in the world a few years from now will in fact be countries like India, countries that don't have vigorous economies, countries that can't afford to control emissions. So it's important that we actually keep our economy going. Again, that's why when Mr. Colvin says we ought to take the tax bill and tear it up, that tax bill is the one that actually got our economy going. It's going to allow us to get the revenue to keep these programs going. So, you know, I don't always agree with the Trump administration. One thing I disagree about, which is an environmental issue, is the Chesapeake Bay program. The Trump administration wanted to zero it out in the first year and greatly reduce the size of it in the second year. I sit on the Appropriations Committee. I'm a Republican. I opposed the president. I wanted full funding for that program, and we got full funding for that program. That's an important program. That's a program that deals with the Chesapeake Bay, such an important asset to the 1st Congressional District.
Thank you. Mr. Colvin.
There are 435 congressional districts across our country, and exactly one is home to the Chesapeake Bay and the way of life here. That's us. Dr. Harris, you're a member of the coal caucus, sir. We don't have any coal in our district. If we want to make progress on issues like Conowingo Dam, Governor Hogan has told Exelon, the company who operates the dam, that they need to do their fair share. The reason he doesn't have a partner in Congressman Harris is Congressman Harris is in the back pocket of that corporate PAC. He takes money, sir, you take money from the Exelon corporate PAC. Just like Cecil County is suing the pharmaceutical industry and Governor Hogan's supporting him, Dr. Harris isn't, because he takes money from the pharmaceutical industry. But it's not enough to be against something. We have to be for something. I want to get to 10 billion oysters by 2025. That will do fantastic things for our environment. It will do even better things for our local economies. I refuse to believe in our district, an investment in the environment and what's good for the economy, they're actually hand in glove. I want to get to 10 billion oysters by 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martin, 60 seconds.
It's interesting that Mr. Colvin brings up the Conowingo Dam, because what is happening in Kent County with regards to their oyster reserves it's horrible for the marine, the fishermen and the marine life there. And it's due to a lack of maintenance on that dam that is prohibiting the pollution from traveling down the Chesapeake. I too agree that legislation should definitely allow the funding and the focus on how the adverse effects of what's going on with that dam are affecting the Eastern Shore. They shouldn't have to deal with bureaucratic red tape to get that taken care of.
Thank you. Mr. Harris.
Sure. Yeah, Jesse, just to correct one thing, there are actually 7 congressional districts that border the Bay, and all of them are involved in the Bay economy. But anyway, look, Jesse, you took money from people who take money from Exelon. Are you going to give the money back? That's all I ask. Just look at your last report filing. You take money from people who take money from Exelon. Are you going to ask them to give it back? Of course you're not, because this makes a very good talking point, but it doesn't solve the problem. Look, on Conowingo, there's a solution, but we got to think outside the box. Exelon will never be able to pay for the entire remediation at Conowingo. They just can't. They'll walk away from the project if we ask them to. What we have to do is we have to think about creating land just like we did at Hart Mill Island, just like we did at Poplar Island, just as we did in the Midshore Islands. That's the way we have to do it. We're going to have to dredge that dam, and we're going to have to create land somewhere. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's get through the environmental regulations that would allow us to do it, and let's solve that problem. That's what I'm leading. That's why I'm one of the leading people who deal with the Army Corps of Engineers on Conowingo.
Mr. Colvin.
There are more than one congressional district that touch the Chesapeake Bay, but the way of life that is in the livelihoods and the DNA here, the #1 defender of that way of life in Washington should be the representative from Maryland's 1st Congressional District. Congressman Harris, you just sent out a mailer saying that you had the endorsement from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
Didn't say that.
And they're now bringing legislation against you because that you don't have their endorsement. This job comes down to relationships. If we're going to solve Conowingo Dam, it comes down to relationships. You need me to have the representative should have relationships with other members of the federal delegation, with our governor, with everyone involved in Exelon. There is a way of life here that needs defending, and you can't do it when you're in the back pocket of something like the Big Pharma or something like Exelon. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, as a reminder, for the next round of questions, each question will be directed at a specific candidate. That candidate will have 90 seconds. The other candidates will have 60 seconds for follow-up, and then we move on to the next question. The first question in this round is on health care and will be directed at Mr. Colvin. Mr. Colvin, the Affordable Care Act impacts approximately 51,000 people who live in the 1st Congressional District. What are your solutions for getting better health care, affordable insurance, and lowering prescription drug costs to align more with the prices paid in the rest of the world?
We actually think there are 54,000 people in our district, but your point is well taken, Todd. The first step, Dr. Harris is still the same guy who campaigned in 2010 against, he campaigned on taking away health care from people in our district, and then you showed up, sir, and your first day, your first action, before you'd done a day's work in Washington, was to complain that your personal health care, congressional health care plan, which you better believe is better than what we get in our district, hadn't kicked in yet. And then you spent the next 8 years, sir, you voted over 70 times to take away health care from 54,000 people in our district with no backup plan. When I got to Afghanistan, we weren't allowed to say, I don't like the plan, I'm just going to give up. Or I don't like those guys, I'm not going to work with them. We had to get the job done. We had to get results. So the first step in our congressional district is voting Dr. Harris out. For pre-existing conditions, sir, and you think that insurance companies shouldn't have to cover people with pre-existing conditions, pre-existing conditions is my neighbor with metastatic breast cancer. It's my wife. It's your brother. It's your neighbor. It's your sisters. First step on any health care plan in our district is voting Dr. Harris out, because he has voted to take away health care from over 54,000 people. He's had 8 years, sir, to come up with a backup plan, and you don't have one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Jesse, there you go again. You know, it's just not true. I never claimed the CBF endorsed me, but they did write a letter to the Star Democrat, and you know full well, thanking me for my work on the Chesapeake Bay program. I never claimed an endorsement. That's just not true. I never voted to take away the health care of 54,000 people. The American Health Care Act, you claim I didn't have a replacement. It was called the American Health Care Act. I voted on it once. Mr. Cardin voted on it twice. He didn't like it. I liked it. I think it had the solutions we needed. Pre-existing conditions, go back and check the record, Jesse. I've always supported coverage for pre-existing conditions. I've taken care of patients for over 30 years. I know health care better than you know health care. And for you to say that I don't care about taking care of a patient or wouldn't take care of a patient properly is personally, I take an affront to that, Mr. Colvin.
Ms. Martin.
The ACA needs to be repealed. Community pricing, excessive regulations, it needs to go. Guaranteed renewability was an option prior to the ACA. We have 2 major insurance providers on the Eastern Shore, and one of those providers secured insurance for Eastern Shore residents prior to the ACA's implementation. Healthcare does not need to be in the hands of the government. There are 24 states right now that are testing direct care programs where they completely eliminate insurance companies. Why do we need them? Why do we need or require that we have a middleman where majority of the cost goes towards administration fees? I am a very strong supporter of eliminating the ACA. Now, with regards to the 50,000+ individuals in the district, there are over 450,000 individuals in this district. Why should there be redistribution for a small percentage? We can give them options without doing that.
Thank you. Next question. Congressman Harris, you serve on the House Appropriations Committee, which controls the allocation of federal dollars. Adjusted for inflation, middle-class wages have not increased in roughly 3 decades. If re-elected, what will you do to bring much-needed job growth and support for the middle class to the families of the 1st Congressional District?
Sure. I'll just keep on doing the job I've been doing. When I ran for office, I promised 2 things: more jobs, lower taxes. That's what our middle class needs in America, needs more jobs. And in fact, now the middle class income is in fact going up, thanks to President Trump. It stagnated for years under the last administration, but now it's going back up. So yes, we need more jobs. So we did need to pass that tax reform bill that Mr. Colvin says we should just tear up and start all over. No, we needed that. It resulted in more jobs. It resulted in the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. It resulted in 7.2 million jobs available nationwide right now. It stimulated the economy. And I did vote for lower taxes because I wanted to put $2,500 more into the average middle-class family's pocket in this 1st district. That's exactly what we did, and this is what Mr. Colvin says. We're just going to tear it up and start all over. No, that's a bad idea. We've got to keep this economy going. It's going great. It's going strong. It's doing great things for the 1st district. We need to keep it going. The last thing we need to do is to tear up the tax reform bill that has worked so well, to return to the regulatory environment that has worked so badly under the last administration, and strangle our businesses. Now, Mr. Hogan got a start here for the last 4 years. He got it going. And President Trump over the last 2 years put in the extra juice, and this economy's running on high. We need to keep it running that way.
Mr. Colvin.
I think we need less politicians in Washington who feel it's part of their job to tell you how you should feel about your checkbook at the end of the month. I think we also need more members of Congress who know what a balance sheet is. I worked in business in New York. I worked in business as a consultant. I helped Fortune 500 companies create jobs. We need more members of Congress on both sides of the aisle who know what a balance sheet is and recognize there's 2 sides to it. National unemployment, it's at an all-time low. That's great. Here's the problem. In our district, it's twice the national average. And the median income in our congressional district lags. It's 10% lower than the state average. There are 250,000 unfilled cyber jobs in the state. We're at Cecil College today. Cecil College has a fantastic cyber program. We need to double and triple down on it. There are solar jobs, there are cyber jobs. These are the jobs of the future. If we want to give our young people a reason to stay, it comes down to jobs of the future. And it begins with less people in Washington who think their job is to tell you how you should feel about your checkbook. Thank you.
Ms. Martin.
While decreasing taxes is always a great idea, we now have a problem with spending. And I propose that legislation should implement a spending cap so that if you are offering benefits to American citizens, you're not causing an adverse effect of increasing spending at the same time. Now, I'm no economist, but if you're increasing spending and lowering the income, there's a sense of bankruptcy coming. So I do believe that there should be legislation that implements a spending cap to avoid a fiscal crisis in this country. And I do think that our current congressional members have failed to do that by continuously adding more and more options onto what to spend. I also believe that we should terminate damaging programs that increases that federal spending and hand over some of the responsibility to the states.
Thank you. Final question. Ms. Martin, you've suggested implementing a larger guest worker visa program, as well as deregulating and expanding employment-based green cards as a means of offering an easier path to legal immigration. Specifically, could you explain how expanding legal immigration opportunities will help our illegal immigration problems?
Absolutely. You want to combat illegal immigration by implementing law enforcers that are gathering up individuals like cattle to kick them out of the country. That's not how you combat illegal immigration. Immigrants, those that migrate to this country, contribute to our economy. They're renting, they're going to stores, they're purchasing items, they're increasing economic advantages for small businesses. You don't want to take that away. What you want to do is you want to take those illegals and give them a pathway to legalization so they continue to contribute to the economy. Now, our president suggests building a wall. I'm sorry, but I don't want to spend money out of my pocket to build a wall that's not going to fix the problem of how do we get these individuals to continue to contribute to our economy, but in a legal aspect. So if we expand green cards, get rid of means-tested welfare, expand green cards, and allow these individuals to come into our country to work, contribute to our economy, without relying on government assistance, social assistance programs should not be accessible. Then you will see a huge change in the adverse effects that a lot of individuals do complain about.
Mr. Harris.
Look, one of the proudest things I do for the 1st Congressional District is go around the district, identify the problems, be a leader on the solutions. So we had a problem with the temporary work visas called the H-2B program. It's what the seafood processors use. There are other industries in the district, but most acutely the seafood processing industry. And Congress sets a quota every year. The quota is set too low. So over the years, when Barbara Mikulski was in the Senate, I worked with Senator Mikulski. She sat on the Appropriations Committee in the Senate. I sat on the Appropriations Committee in the House. We put language in each and every year to make sure that our crab picking houses, for instance, had enough temporary workers. Now what happened? She left. Unfortunately, there's no one left in the Senate side on the Democrats to take up the mantle on that, so I fight this fight alone, but I'm fighting it. And that's why the language that's in the appropriations bill that we're going to decide in January has my solution language to the problem. That's why Aubrey Vincent of Lindy Seafood, the leader for the H-2B visa situation here in Maryland, has endorsed me, and you'll see her on TV. You see her in ads on TV. They know that I'm a leader on this issue.
Thank you. Mr. Colvin.
Senator Mikulski used to call those crab houses every year before the lottery, or before there even had to be a lottery, and say, how you doing on your visas? Can I help you out? Dr. Harris, you didn't call them before this could have been solved. You waited until there was an H-2B visa crisis, and then you went to go find a TV camera to say you were working on the issue. I'm going to call every one of those houses, whether they vote for me or not, because it's not just an immigration issue. It's a way of life issue. It's an economics issue. You talk about immigration it's an ideological conservatism designed to scare us. What works is the pragmatic conservatism of a Governor Hogan. If we ever want to get a bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform, we need people who actually want to get around a table and get to yes. There are 100 military veterans running for Congress this year. We want Congress to work again, and we are going to be a new generation of leadership who's going to put country over party. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to each of the candidates. We're now going to move on to closing statements. Each candidate will have 60 seconds for a closing statement, and we will begin with Ms. Martin.
As a representative of Congress, there are 3 ideals that I will abide by because I hold them true. Humility. I don't have all the answers, but I know that by working in a bipartisan fashion without attacking my opponents, but instead focusing on the true matters at heart, which are the citizens of the Eastern Shore and the rest of this country, I will do my job as I have given the oath. Number 2, I hold specific principles that the Constitution is the most valuable and most important document, and I will ensure that any legislation that I agree upon is in respect to the clauses and amendments within that document. And number 3, I believe in term limits. I don't look to become a representative and a career politician.
Mr. Colvin.
Thank you again to Cecil TV. No one can afford to sit on the sidelines this election. We need a new generation of leadership, and our district needs and deserves better representation. Congressman Harris, I think you are living in a fantasy land. You cannot show up to the opioids fight with integrity if you take hundreds of thousands of dollars from Big Pharma. There are 135,000 seniors in our district, and you talk about programs like Social Security as if they're entitlements. They're not. We need a new generation of leadership in Congress. I am proud to be part of a wave of young veterans running. It's not enough to be against something. We've got to be for something. These young veterans who are running, we're going to put country over party. We want to bring results to Washington. November 6th, let's bring courage and common sense and leadership back to Washington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Harris.
Well, I want to thank Cecil TV, Cecil College, and obviously you, Todd, for giving the people of Cecil County a chance to see the difference between the candidates. I want to thank my wife for putting up with me and all the nights and days away from home. Look, I'm not a newcomer to this district. I've lived in it over 30 years. I've been a leader in this community for over 30 years. I've kept the promises I made when I ran. More jobs, lower taxes. But we can't stop there. We have to deal with this scourge of opioid addiction that is ruining our families and our communities. And we've taken the first steps. We need to keep going. We also always have to defend our Second Amendment rights from those who would take them away from us, like Mr. Colvin would. And we have to return civility to our debate, and we have to return family values to our communities. I thank you again, and I ask for your vote on November 6th.
Thank you all. Thank you to Cecil TV, thank you to Cecil College, and especially thank you to Mr. Colvin, Mr. Harris, Ms. Martin, not only for joining us, but for putting your name on a ballot and asking people for their vote. I wish more people were inspired to do the same. Thank you all, and have a good day.
Is your car running like it's 4th and long and you need a Hail Mary?
Catch the best service in town all season long.
We have professional technicians standing by to help with everything from preventive care to major engine repairs. Looking for a specific brand of tire? Talk to our experts about our wide variety of tires and we'll have you rolling in no time. Come see the guys at Premier Auto and Tire at one of our locations.